Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Star Fox 2. In the last part we finished off hard mode completely, and now it's time for us to start off the final difficulty expert mode. Like I mentioned last time and showed off, you can only unlock this difficulty if you finish hard mode with Corneria sustaining 0 damage throughout the entire run. It's very doable, you just need to make sure you go out of your way to take it a bit slowly so that you can avoid damage at all costs. So, starting off, expert mode doesn't appear that different from hard. We got the 2 battlecruisers, 3 planets randomly selected from the 6 to be attacked, and of course the usual enemy units and missiles coming at you. The biggest differences off the bat are gonna be just what you're encountering both in the stage designs, but also the new enemies and missile types you can find along the way. For instance, here's one I actually showed off before, but I haven't mentioned directly. The quad missile type, which shows up, I think this can even show up on normal mode, it's just more likely on hard. When you destroy the first missile, the other 3 split off and go different directions, and at times different speeds. But these are your best friends at times for getting item drops. Like these ones and the large missiles in particular have very good chances of dropping either health or some other good item. So keep your eyes out for them because they can be pretty helpful in that regard. Now, the time requirement you have to clear to beat expert mode is 280 time, which seems like a lot, but if you pay attention, you'll notice something's already a little bit off with the world map. There's no stars near the planets indicating there's a Starwolf member nearby. I'm not going to talk exactly about why that is yet, but let's just say expert belies your expectations at first. With that said, the levels are generally harder. For instance, here on Fortuna now, instead of just going and stepping on a switch, we actually have a bit of a mini-boss to fight that's honestly kind of annoying in some regards. It is a squid who's primarily underwater. But when you shoot them, they surface and you need to go up above to actually do damage by shooting at their head. While they're underwater, you can do some damage, but you're more or less here to get them out of the water, period. Also, the missile for this stage is once again hidden just outside the corner underground, but at least there's more of an indicator that's going to be over there because the missile spawns in, I think, at a sooner draw distance than the coin from memory. And this is what I talked about when we first got here to Fortuna. The moment you're underwater and you press the transform button, you automatically just ascend vertically completely because the R-Wing cannot be underwater. You cannot fly underwater, you can only swim. My best advice for a lot of bosses like this that you encounter throughout hard and expert mode is to just pump the brakes and hold them that way, and then just spam fire at the weak point, like the head here on the squid. Eventually the squid does go back underwater, at which point you just have to kind of follow it. If you go through these levels in a certain order, or if you get different spawns, you might have twin blasters at this point, so fights like this just go a lot more quickly. Again, that's the slight random element of Star Fox 2. Your playthroughs can be completely different from mine, and while the stages themselves don't change, the situations you enter them in very much can. And there is a level of dynamic I appreciate to that more than a lot of other games that have heavy random elements like roguelikes and roguelites. If only because the things that happen there are set, it's just random which ones you get to do, I guess is the way I want to phrase it. It's sort of, what's a good comparison? I guess in some regards, it's a little bit like the Lunar Ruins from Final Fantasy IV Advanced, albeit that's there's a bit of a stretch in that regard, considering the different amounts of randomness there, where if you go in on a repeat playthrough, you can be very prepared for what's coming ahead and save certain levels for later, and there's a strategy to that when going for high scores I do appreciate. Not that I'm one to do that a lot, but it's at least nice to have. Randomness in games is a very much mileage may vary kind of thing. I know some people are all over roguelites, it's their favorite genre ever, whereas I really just can't get into them on the whole. Like, there's a couple I like here and there, like I like Hades, even though I've never finished it. I like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon to an extent. Past a certain point, I stopped being into it. I guess my tolerance for randomness in games comes down to the level of randomness in the genre they're in. Like, enemy drops or random battles in RPGs, no problem. Throw that at me all you want. Dungeon designs in RPGs, a little less so, not a big fan of that. Enemy drops in like a platformer, sure, go ahead. Attack patterns for bosses, oh yeah, absolutely. Set boss patterns are fun in some instances, but I prefer to be kept on my toes by some bosses like that. So hey, give me random battle formations like that. But when it comes to what I can expect going to this area beyond its one gimmick, like this is going to be the fire area, I need more set stuff than just that. Which is why I tend to not play many roguelikes admittedly, because I realize it's just not for me. And I feel like that's something, and maybe we already talked about this during this LP, I actually cannot remember. I feel like that's something gamers TM need to get behind more, is just realizing when something's not for them and stopping there. Because forcing yourself to play something you're not having fun with, unless you've been deliberately told you should wait until you get to this point and then see how you feel kind of deals, it's just not going to make the experience better for you. If anything, you're going to come away much more bitter, considering it's like, alright, I kept going and I just never clicked, and that's time I'll never get back. I mean, that's why, admittedly, and I think I've talked about this before, that's me and Hollow Knight. I love Metroids, I love that entire genre, but between its charm system, meaning you need to rely on builds that you need to customize for yourself, and the environment, I think, being a little too spread out and has too many pathways, even for me as a Metroid fan, it's overwhelming and it's hard for me to get into. But that said, I still really respect its place in the industry. I think it's a very prominent member of the indie industry for a reason. It resonates with people. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm looking forward to seeing whether or not Silk Song, whenever the hell it releases, if it can be more of a game I can get into. Do I expect it to be? Not exactly, but I'd like to see it be that. Now, I do get a little reckless in this playthrough when it comes to Corneria's damage percent. If only because I'm trying to rush through the timer more than anything. Again, take your time, analyze the situations, and go in with full expectations of, I'm gonna need to potentially either break out of stages to go fix other problems, or delay stages as long as possible. Also, this particular little squadron leader is kind of annoying. It's a very fast opponent. As you can see, it's very easily outspeeding me with my rotation. And this is one of the enemies that can actively, very quickly, and easily flee from you if you're not quick about taking it out ASAP. Thankfully for memory, that one is exclusive to Expert Mode. Now, last time I mentioned offhandedly towards the end that if you were having fun but not exactly feeling the game, that you probably shouldn't tackle Expert Mode. The main reason for that is, while the levels get some new stuff on Expert Mode, I think it can be really overwhelming in a way that even hard mode isn't, and it's just hard for me to get into in some regards, less so even for the tactical reasons. It's the tactics mixed with the new encounters and especially the dogfights. The dogfights were problems on normal and hard mode, especially on hard mode with certain cases. But on expert mode, I'm not going to say the AI reads your inputs, but it gets really precise at either dodging your attacks or blocking them in ways that just doesn't feel... Fair isn't the word I'm looking for, but it's what's coming to mind. I guess the word I'm looking for maybe is... There's not enough leniency, I feel, I guess is the way I should phrase it. Like, maybe even just, like, in a couple of frames more, so that it's a tight window to hit a charge shot on, like, a Star Wolf member would be welcome. There's times in this difficulty where you really feel like, if you're trying to get through things quickly at least, you need to really take hits and sacrifice your HP in order to get the hits in yourself. And that can be a very worthwhile sacrifice in some games, but in a game like this that's somewhat random in its progression, where playthroughs can take upwards of an hour, there's a level where it just doesn't feel like it's the right kind of sacrifice, I guess is the way I want to phrase it. It's one out of necessity rather than one out of a choice to make things go faster or easier for you. Something I do recommend, if you're trying to make a playthrough a little more streamlined though, doing what I got on the 2 hard mode runs, where the planets were all aligned on one side of the map and just resetting until you get that, can be helpful for the amount of time you use getting from one area to another, because especially if, say, the 3 planets that are attacked by default on expert mode here are the 3 on the right. You can then use the mothership teleport to Meteor and tackle whatever missile spawns in pretty quickly. and then go after all 3 planets, and then maybe even the nearby cruiser all in one go, without having to worry about a lot of time lost. And you can even take care of any of the spawning ship squadrons out of the ship, no problem. The only thing you have to worry about at that point is the cruiser on the opposite side of the map. Getting a bad layout can very much determine a very painful run, and it doesn't matter too much on normal or hard, but expert mode can be very punishing, especially if you're going for high score stuff, which there actively is a purpose to that I'm gonna go over in the final part in particular, because it's the one thing I'm not showing off that I foreshadowed last time, if memory serves. I think the one benefit to maybe having one planet off to a different side is you can rely a little bit more on the satellite defense station in that case, potentially taking out a rogue squadron or a rogue missile from the opposite side of the planets, because otherwise you're going to be taking care of everything yourself, and it can hold on to a charge for a while, and that might be wasting using that. But it ultimately does feel safer just to have every planet you can first tackle on one side. Thinking about it more, the battle cruisers are a little bit funny in most of their setups because getting into the ship is so quick and the cores are so quick. That's probably why they put some more mini-bosses on higher difficulties in the main portions, because they're there to potentially eat up time for either their squadrons to approach Corneria or for the missiles to spawn in and get shut out. And that's, again, part of why I think there's that little hierarchy of what you should take out that slightly varies depending on difficulty, where it's like, take out missiles, then probably the cruisers, then the squadrons, then the planets. Because even though the planets can spawn more missiles, they're so quick to take out that their danger level kind of equals out in the long run, I guess is the way I want to phrase that. A lot of the squadrons here on extra mode that are new for the difficulty, I do recommend actually just using a smart bomb on them unless you're trying to save them for the Star Wolf members, because they are still going to show up. Because as I mentioned before, Star Wolf, smart bomb's about half their health gone in an instant, and that's very reliable as a way to take them out, especially considering if you choose Fox and Falco at the start, you have a guaranteed 4 of them anyway. And I also probably should mention that, for this difficulty, I brought in Fox and Falco for that very reason. Smart bomb's very reliable, and I think the extra shield, while reducing speed and charge blast time, is worth it. The best way to get a high score here really is to use Miyu and Phase R-Wings, but I just don't find them reliable enough because their lower shield to be worth it for the entire playthrough. Maybe having one could be, especially if you can find some smart bombs from a missile or in a stage, something like that. But if you're trying to play things safe, Fox and Falco are the best bet on the whole. Alright, Titania, what happens here? Oh, that's right, this is where they start to get cute with that. So while we still have to press switches for a lot of the game's stages in order to actively access the base, on expert mode they start to get a little bit cute with what the switches themselves are. Also peppercoin for this stage right on top of the pyramid in the center. So for the most part, on normal and hard, the way you unlock a stage is by stepping on a pressure switch, taking out a boss, or destroying a very specific target in the stage, otherwise usually little barrier generators. The switches here, on expert mode, get a little cute in that now we have ones you actively have to push with the walker. There's some that are going to be roulettes you have to just mash the button and hope land on the thing you want. In that regard, some of the stages on expert mode get very annoying in ways that are meant to be more time sinks than anything. So in the case you're in a very time-sensitive situation, like a missile getting close to Corneria, they really want you to weigh the weight of your decisions in that regard and do it fast for the most part. Yeah, the timer pauses if you actively like press start and either choose to return to map or pause the game period, but that's not going to do much to help the actual situation around you while you have that time to think. And that's probably where the big thing for expert mode comes from. It really requires you to understand not only the speed that things generally move at in Lylat, but also when the best time to maybe do a tactical retreat to take care of something else is, because there are times they really want you to do that here. Either way, mini-boss for this base is Tall Kong. Tall Kong's a bit funny in that they roam about this giant square room with essentially a steamroller kind of thing going on. And they're meant to try to charge at you and they can throw that steamroller at you, and I think they have some projectiles, but if you just get behind them, they're not gonna stand much threat, like so. It's honestly kind of funny, and in some regards, this always reminds me of the boss Reaverbot from that one room of Mega Man Legends. Both in the first area and the variant of it you can find going around in a very similar square in the main Catalog's ruins. Gotta love Mega Man Legends. I need to play that again. It's been a little bit. There was a part of me while recording this project that was wondering if I should eventually just start speeding up the core fights. Admittedly, less so for the cores themselves and more for how long the exiting cutscenes for a stage takes, but I ultimately decided against that, if only because I don't want to speed up too much within a project like this. The dog fights and the replays to show you which orders I go through things to get certain objectives done was the most I felt comfortable doing that with. And that kind of gets into something very weird about this channel nowadays, and I think I talked about this either in an LP or a stream recently, or with at least my buddies. I sort of have two different types of fast forward I now do in LPs, where I do the old type where I just speed up and play music for like boss rushes and all that, or doing things in certain ways like I do for the mainline Pokemon games. But then for other ones, I do the visual filtering, and I can't exactly explain what makes those be different in my brain and why they have to be, but they just do. Because somewhere in my ADHD and autism-riddled mind, that's just how it needs to be, and that's the best way I can explain it. Getting back to the game, though, we actively want to come into the infected satellite defense station here on Extra Mode because they actively hide an extra pepper metal here on this difficulty. It's the only time this happens in the game. So if you're going for 100%, you need to at least let the station get infected once. Like I said, usually recommend letting it get infected anyway because taking it out brings you in a good location and is pretty quick and safe anyway, but be wary depending on your situation. So just a moment ago, Andros ordered his cruisers to advance and to prepare the planet cannon. The planet cannon is one of the few things I'm not showing off. Andros can do that at random, but I think he's most likely to do it and guaranteed to, maybe even on expert mode. He orders whatever cruisers that are still around on the map to advance on the planet and prepare essentially a giant Death Star laser beam. In fact, I think it's kind of closer to what the sequel trilogy would later have, weirdly. And it's this giant, epic laser shooter that comes out of the main cruisers. You need to get there to destroy them as soon as you can. And you get a really cool cutscene that's directly a reference to the scene from Star Wars A New Hope, where the laser hits the planet, and it looks cool. It doesn't do much damage, though. I think I've seen it do like 3 to 5 at most. Maybe it depends on the situation, like maybe on higher difficulties it does different damage, or on, depending on how many bases you've taken out, it does less damage and more damage. Because this seems like a game where that kind of thing would happen, but you don't really have to worry about it. If they're going after the planet directly, make them your first priority, if only because they're on the way anyway, and when they're closer to the planet, that means they're very quick to take out. But I honestly do not remember if the planet cannon technically counts as a separate stage where you need to attack the laser itself, because I seldom let it happen anyway, because the cruisers, when they're on the move to Corneria, also move decently slow. So intercepting them is pretty quick to do, from my experience. Also, if you're going for a high score run, I know this kind of goes without saying in most cases, but just in case, target every enemy in sight if you're going for a high score. On top of that, doing so is very helpful again for drops enemies might drop, be it health or otherwise, so I recommend doing that anyway if you're taking things a little slower, but I'm trying to do things relatively speedily, and in some regards that actually can mess me up, and I don't recommend playing this way unless you're super used to the game. Alright, same core stuff, don't have to worry too much here, just make sure you grab the pepper coin in the back. Also, it just occurred to me, I didn't actually note how many pepper medals you should have leaving hard mode behind, since I did that for normal mode. When you leave hard mode between the 2 to 3 playthroughs you need to do, you should have 32 of the 52 total pepper medals. The last 20 are exclusive to expert mode, which is the most of any difficulty, yes, but there's a good reason for that. There's more stages here than anywhere else in the game, and that's going to become apparent right about now. If you think you do well, you are a fool. It's no fun when there's no resistance. Launch planetary missiles at Corneria. That's about to be 4 missiles. Tasty. So the other 3 planets just got attacked and now have bases on them. Expert mode is the only difficulty where you need to clear every stage in order to beat the game, and depending on the order of operations and how many of the bases you have done when you destroy the first set of cruisers, this is where expert mode can really bear its fangs. And not only is there a lot of targets potentially targeting Corneria all at once, like here we had, I think, like, what, 2 squadrons, 4 missiles, and now Star Wolf has spawned around the 3 new planets, so you need to worry about them as well. This is where things can get complicated for damage, either for Corneria or for the Star Fox team themselves. If you start getting stressed out and overwhelmed at this point, I do not blame you. It's the point they really want that to happen, and you just need to kind of pause, take a moment to analyze, and figure out what your best move is. Rushing through at this point can get the job done, but it's gonna be messy in most cases, I'll tell you that, especially with how precise, once again, they now make Star Wolf. This is also where targeting squadrons first might come in handy, because with all these missiles now being targeted at Corneria, the one charge that the satellite defense station will probably have at this point is going to come in real handy for saving you some headache. Also, since I haven't mentioned it yet, whenever you're in a lot of space stages like this, particularly when you're near the meteor stage, I think is when it's more likely to see this, the meteors you see are very real and can hurt you, especially if they're one of the big blue ones. Like that. Ow, I had no way of seeing that was coming. Thanks, game. There's a little bit of that. I think that's more likely to be seen if you're in first-person mode, and that's another argument for first-person. Again, I swap back and forth depending on the situation usually, because there's times where I think it's better to be in first-person and times where it's not. Like some mini-bosses you can face here in space, I think are easier to fight one way or the other distinctly, especially here on expert mode. Also, let our current time speak to the difference in scales between the difficulties, because we're at 71, about to be, I think, 73 by the time we get into the next battle, out of 280. So we're already about a fourth of the way through the timer, and we have still a lot to do. But also, we would almost be out of time on normal mode right now. And while running out of time on normal mode does feel a little hard, it is decently possible to do on a first playthrough if you get overwhelmed or misunderstand what you're doing or are messing around a bit too much, going for score points in some cases. So make sure you're really keeping an eye out for what's happening, because that timer, with how many objectives you have to do here on expert mode, can fly by when you're not paying attention, especially depending on the length of certain dogfights in those sections. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 7, we're going to continue through expert mode, not quite finishing it, but getting pretty darn close from memory. See you guys then.